All right, welcome everyone. Holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 15. Again, want to welcome everyone. Holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 15. We are in verse 17, speaking about the laws, discharges. Spoke a lot about that last week. About finished up actually verse 16 about a seminal emission for a man and why it says he has to wash his entire flesh, etc. So we're going to continue again. We are holding by the Book of Leviticus chapter 15, verse 17. So the Torah tells me, Kol beget, kol or, asher yi alav shichvas zara, kubas b'mayim tamei ha'ar. So here the Torah tells me that any garment or anything of leather upon which there shall be this discharge, the semen, shall be immersed in water and has to remain impure until evening. So basically, someone has discharge, it gets on any clothing, gets on leather, then it has to be immersed in water, and it's going to become pure only at night. Right? It has to go, I guess, for the whole day. It has to be washed, has to be immersed. Right? Then it's going to go through. Then you have to wait till evening. And once you wait till evening, that's when it becomes pure. Says Torah further, verse 18. V'isha asher yishka v'ish oisa shichva zara v'rachsu b'mayim tamu ha'ar. Now, here we spoke before about someone who either became a zav, right, had a emission, man or woman. Right, then it spoke about a man, right, who has a seminal emission. Then it talks about the garment, has to be washed, etc. And now it talks about a woman with whom a man will have carnal relation. Right, they are intimate. They shall immerse in the water. They shall remain impure until evening. So what's going on here? So there seemingly are emissions probably on both sides, and therefore both have to immerse in the water. Right? Both would seemingly have to go to the mikveh. Both seemingly would have to go to a spring, the ocean, whatever it is, right? In order to become pure. Now it comes on Rashi. Rashi over here says, okay, what's it talking about over here? That they shall immerse in water. Now, what's the purpose of immersing in water? Right? What's the purpose of immersing in water over here? Rashi says clear. Rashi says, Gezerah. It's a Gezerah Melech. What's a Gezerah Melech? It's a decree of the king. It's a decree of God that we can't understand. Right? There are two types of laws in the Torah. One law is that there are laws called mishpatim. Mishpatim are laws that that are rational, right? That would make sense, right? In general, let's say don't steal, don't kill, something like that. And they're what we call chukim. Achok, the laws that don't make sense, right? In this case, this law, Rashi says, doesn't make sense. What's the ultimate chok, the ultimate law that doesn't make sense? The red heifer. Why? Because someone who's impure, Kohen sprinkled the ashes of this red cow, sprinkled it on the person to make him pure. But at the same time, the Kohen became impure. Right? Totally irrational. How can someone become pure and someone become impure at the same time? Right? Doesn't make sense. Not a rational thing. But there are many mitzvahs in the Torah that do not make rational sense. I would probably say 80% of the Torah. I'll give another example. Laws of kashrus. Right? Milk is permitted. Meat is permitted. If I put them together and I cook them, makes it forbidden. And I have all these laws, not to mix milk and meat. Also doesn't make sense. Right? If something's permitted, two things are permitted. Why, if I put them together through heat, it makes it not permitted, makes it forbidden, even if I don't eat it. right? Even if I would give it to a non-Jew, forbid it. Because the Torah tells me 3 times, I'm not allowed to cook a calf in its mother's milk. So what does it mean? So the rabbis tell us I can't cook it even if nobody eats it, even if I would give it to a non-Jew, but I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to eat it. I'm not allowed to get benefit from it. Right? 3 things. That's why the Torah mentions 3 times why you're not allowed to cook a calf in its mother's milk. But there are many things in the Torah itself don't make rational sense. Right? It's what we call a gezeres melech. It's a decree. It's a decree of the king. Now, if we would understand that in a general way, then we never come to sin ever. Now, why do I say that? Because if we understood everything we do is really a decree of the king, right? There are people, I mentioned this, last night in my class in Pirkei Avos, that, people have blocks. They throw out blocks. What I mean by blocks is they throw out an excuse and they'll throw out something and say, oh, that doesn't make sense. I don't have to keep it. Or, where's God during the Holocaust? Well, I got a great book. It's called Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. You want to read about it? No, it's just a question I ask rabbis that make them fidget. Okay? I don't have to answer that question. Right? So, but if we understood everything comes from God, even the Noahide laws, right? We're going to speak about later. The Rambam says clear that where the Noahide laws come from, God passed these things down, these laws down to Adam. Adam passed them down to Noah, right? But why a non-Jew keeping the Noahide laws? And they're not going to convert. They keep these laws, right? The Rambam says they have to keep the laws. You know why? Because God said so. Because God passed down the Torah to Moshe, and Moshe passed it down to us. So, okay, that's by something that's universal. That's something that would make sense according to our logic, most things, right? Most things that would make sense that a non-Jew has to keep, right? Even if they don't convert. So very good. But what about all the other laws in the Torah? There are things that do make sense in the Torah, but why did I mention people throw out blocks? Because they're going to say, well, if I don't really understand it, then why should I keep it? Or if I don't fully understand it, yeah, it could take a long time. It could take years going through Jewish philosophy to understand a lot of what the Torah says. But people throw that out there and they say, you know what? That's just the way it is, right? That's just the way it is. So if that's true, then I'll never do anything, right? A person will never do anything because they're too busy trying to figure it out. Just like I mentioned, Rabbi Wallerstein mentioned a few weeks ago, we should be well. And he said, someone goes on a plane. They said, well, I can't really go on the plane. I really want you to explain to me thermodynamics. I want to understand about physics. How could I ever go on a plane? Take me years, right? So, okay, it'll take you years, but you'll never get on a plane because it's going to take you too long to figure it out. So there are many things that we don't understand fully. What does that mean? I don't have to keep the mitzvahs. What does it matter how much I understand or not? They're God-given. Doesn't mean I don't have to learn. Doesn't mean I have to put my best foot forward, right, to try and understand. But a person can say, well, if you don't give me an answer, or at least an answer I like, why should I keep it? And if I gave you an answer you like, you're going to keep it? No, you say, I don't like that answer. Or say, no, I have to think about it some more. I want to learn it at a higher level. It's all excuses. That's all it is. People are going to say the same thing. It doesn't matter what the mitzvah is. Oh, maybe you can explain it that way. Oh, maybe you can explain it the other way. Why should I keep it? Why should I keep it if I don't fully understand it? Now, that makes sense to a certain extent. If someone's really searching for truth, the problem is you're going to be doing that forever. You're never going to look into it. Like when's the last time someone really thought about, I don't know, something deep in the Torah? They haven't. Most people don't think about it. They'll just say, oh, that's foolish. Only someone with a puny brain would want to believe that and to leap of faith and it's this and that. When's the last time they ever really thought about it? They haven't. They done the research? No. They read the Torah from cover to cover? No. They see the movie? Probably not. Right? So who cares? But they're throwing it out just as a block. But if we would understand, I'm talking to us, if we would understand everything's a divine decree. Every last thing is a divine decree. Some things I understand more. Some things I understand less. Doesn't matter. If it's a divine decree, now it doesn't mean we don't have to try and understand it to the best of our ability. Right? We still have to try and understand it, but we have to realize it's a divine decree. Says Moshe Feinstein, blessed memory in Parshas Korach. Korach was no dummy. Gemara says he wasn't a dummy. So how did he make such a big mistake? How did he come out against Aaron and Moshe? Because he didn't get the message. He didn't internalize the message. He came out of Egypt. He held the Aaron. He held the ark. He didn't die. Someone, very, very high level here. Only 20% of Jewish people came out of Egypt. Okay. But the Mishnah Pirkei Avos says in ethics of our fathers that what? That jealousy, honor, desire take us out of this world. So the commentaries there say, right? Literally, could kill us, could destroy a person. Comes along Moshe Feinstein, Torah giant of the last generation, according to everybody. Nothing to talk about. So he says over there, Korach missed the boat. Korach totally missed the boat. Why did he miss the boat? He missed the boat because he didn't understand that everything comes from God. Every last thing. What, you think Moshe Rabbeinu did anything on his own? Yeah, he had to take an accounting, and he took an account of everything, the Mishkan and the tabernacle, to make sure people aren't going to accuse him of stealing. You're going to talk about Moshe Rabbeinu, right? So here, Korach's jealous. So it says Moshe Feinstein, if he understood everything's a divine decree, every last thing is a divine decree in the Torah, then how is he going to be jealous of Moshe? How is he going to think Moshe's playing favorites over here? Okay, the high priesthood, the priesthood went to Aaron, went to his brother. I'm just as valid. Look who came out of me. Look who I saw was supposed to come out of me. Shmuel Navi. Samuel the prophet. What? I'm not a slouch. Right? I'm not a slouch over here. So I want to be the Kohen. I want to have the Kuna. I want to have the priesthood. But God told Moshe, give it to Aaron. But I want this and I want that. That's not Torah. That's Torah made up in your own mind. Right? That's having big eyes. That's having too much desire, too much honor. That's what you want. It's not given to you. It was never supposed to be given to you. God gave it to Aaron. You got a problem with God. So if we look at everything as a divine decree, says Moshe Feinstein, we won't make mistakes. We won't take shortcuts. We won't take any shortcuts over here. Why not? Very simple. Very simple, because we understand. God said it, we do it. That's it. I have to learn about it. I have to try and understand it to the best of my ability. Very good. That's what I have to do. That's exactly what I have to do. Now, it's not what we'll call a third and long. It's not a punt over here to say it's a divine decree. We understand it's a divine decree. But you see, we're not going to do things haphazard. We're not going to do it halfway. If we understand it's a divine decree, and I have to understand the details of what the Torah wants from me and what the Torah demands from me, where are my questions? My questions only are, how do I do it? How do I do it to the best of my ability? Right? How do I do this, mitzvah? That's our question. It's not a question of why. I mean, we have to understand why, but that's not the question. The question is how. How am I supposed to do this mitzvah? Torah doesn't give me details. Torah says, you have to sit in the sukkah for 7 days. No details. We'll get there one day. There are no details. What does the sukkah look like? How many walls? Does it have walls? Does it have a roof? What does it mean I have to sit in it for 7 days? All the time? What about if it's cold? What if it rains? No details. Many things in the Torah don't have details. Not only that, a lot of things don't make sense, but you know what? It doesn't matter. I have to learn the details. I have to understand what I'm supposed to do. And even though I'm supposed to understand what I'm supposed to do, we don't cut corners. You know why we don't cut corners? Because it's the decree of God. It's a divine decree. Again, this is not to say that we just leave our brains overboard and we don't think about what it means. And even if I have difficulty understanding it, don't I have an obligation to keep it? What do I care? I have a difficulty understanding it. I still have to do it. I have to know what the laws are. Right? So here the Torah tells me, as Rashi explains, that now this doesn't make any sense at all. A lot of the, when you look at the laws of sacrifices, the laws of purity and impurity, it's not going according to our normal logic. We have to put, the Torah logic into our own minds. But a lot of things over here don't make any sense. I have to wash this. I have to wait 24 hours. I have to wait less. We're going to see by a menstruating woman, she has to wait 7 days, then have another 7 clean days. We're going to have to see exactly what that's all about. But before we get there, what do we have over here? The Torah tells me a woman is with a man. They're together. So after they're together, they have to go to the mikvah. Seemingly a guy has to go to the mikvah also. Right? Also the decree of Ezra. If he had a seminal emission, you should also go to the mikvah. Now, some people are stringent in that, some people aren't. Right? Not something that, I didn't take a survey. I haven't taken the survey how many people do it. Right? But, today it's not obligatory. Might be a midas chasidus, might be a good thing to do. Well, no, it's not obligatory. Certainly for a guy. For a woman, okay, it's a different issue. She's going to have to go to the mikvah, when she starts bleeding. Very good. But what's the point over here? Right? Rashi says a woman whom a man's going to have carnal relations, they have to immerse in the water. They remain impure until evening. Why? Right? Joe asked the question, what in the world's going on here? Why? Why is that the case? Right? You want to know why that's the case? Rashi says it's a decree. It's a divine decree. Total divine decree. So if it's a total divine decree, what am I asking about? Okay, we have to try and still understand, maybe what's behind it. We're not just say, well, it's a divine decree and that's it. We have to try and understand it to the best of our ability. But the reality is all the mitzvahs are divine decree. So what's the question? It's not a question, I'm not going to do it. See, a person will say, oh, it's only rabbinical. It's only a rabbinical decree that we have to do X, Y, and Z. Many things we have to do rabbinical decree. You say, oh, it's only a rabbinical decree. Where the rabbis get it from? Right? Many times extrapolation from the Torah itself. Right? Noahide laws that I'm going to get into in the next number of weeks. People will say, it's not in the Torah. Right? It's rabbinical. Where the rabbis get it from? It's extrapolated from verses in the Torah. See, the laws of Hanukkah, 100% rabbinical. I don't think too many people complain about the laws of Hanukkah. You're going to light candles, whether with oil, whether with wax, right? One each day. You're going to add one every day. You're going to have latkes. You're going to have donuts. A lot of fun, right? It's an enjoyable holiday. I don't think too many people complain about that. Mixing milk and meat, they may have an issue with. Why do you have to wait 6 hours? If you have meat, and then you want to have milk, and why you don't have to really wait any amount of time, just have to wash my mouth out or whatever from milk. Once I want to eat meat, if I eat milk first or I drink milk first or whatever, I have cheese, as long as it's not hard cheese. So people might have an issue. I want to have milk chocolate. Right? I just had a burger. I want to wash it down with milk chocolate. Too bad. Can't eat milk chocolate. It's forbidden. Yeah, but that's a rabbinical decree. And what about chicken, parmesan? Can't have it. You're right. It's a rabbinical decree. Right? And people only start to say that when they have issues with it. Hanukkah candles, no one has issues with. A woman lighting Shabbos candles, I don't think too many people are going to have issue with. Guy can say, I want to light candles also for Shabbos. Not saying he can't. Right? If he's married, the mitzvah goes to his wife. Right? He can help. He can light the candles first, blow them out, and then she lights to make it easier. Okay, so he's got a part in the mitzvah. It's really her mitzvah. But again, are women going to sit there and complain and say, hey, why do I have to light the candle? I don't think they're going to complain, right? It's not something that's going to bother them. They'll take that on willingly, right? That's not an issue. But when it comes to other rabbinic decrees, let's say eating milk and meat is a good example. One example. Many, many other examples. Laws of Shabbos, even better. What? I can't rip toilet paper. What? God really cares if I rip toilet paper or not? I had someone tell me this once. Someone I grew up with. I saw them many years ago, and they asked me, says, "Is it really true? You're an Orthodox Jew. Is it really true that Orthodox Jews don't rip toilet paper on Shabbos?" I said, "It's true. We don't rip toilet paper on Shabbos." So I said, "Well, what do you do?" So I said, "Well, either you rip it before Shabbos, or use tissues, as long as they're not attached. Whatever, use tissues." And this person was horrified. They were like disgusted. I was like, tissues are probably better, softer. Unless you get really soft toilet paper, we're not going to get gross here, right? But they were like totally disgusted. They were like so primitive. That's what they were thinking. I mean, that's what I thought they were thinking. Oh, it's so primitive. They were like disgusted by it. So I said, "You've been to India? What goes on in India? In a lot of places, like a hole in the ground, there's a jug of water. That's the joke. You never shake an Indian's left hand. That's gross. That is nasty." Right? So again, I'm not going to go there. But I said, that's gross. And that was the end of that discussion. I said, I think this is a little more humane. Doesn't matter. You rip toilet paper, use tissues. What's inhumane about it? What's disgusting about it? You want to use your left hand? I think that's gross. I think everyone agrees that's gross. But that bothers me. That offends me. Yeah, the rabbinical decree. You're right, the rabbinical decree. You have to understand why. You have to understand where it comes. No, they don't want to understand. There are certain things bother people. Oh, I can't believe it. Like, this is so primitive. This is so backwards, so to speak. Now, if they understood it's all a divine decree, and they understood the rabbis have the ability and they have the right in every generation, as the Torah tells me, Book of Deuteronomy, Torah tells me you have to listen to the Kohanim in every generation. We understand that's the rabbis of every generation, right? So you have to listen to them. This is what they say you have to do. Now you're going to say, how do I know what they're saying is true? How do I know it's not a big game of telephone? Oh, very good. Right? Legitimate question. Right? You have to watch my videos on Tanakh, oral law, how oral law works. Right? But people only have issues when the thing doesn't resonate to them, when it doesn't make sense to them. Things that make sense, then the rabbinic decrees, they don't care. They don't make an issue of. Oh, but other things that are rabbinic decree, come on, it's backwards. You really think, oh, who are these rabbis? They have the right. Okay, you want to understand the bigger picture? Or you just want to throw out things you don't like? That's what a lot of people do. They'll throw out a lot of things they don't like. The things they like that are truly 100% rabbinical, they don't have an issue with. It's only certain things they have an issue with, or maybe many things. Doesn't matter. All right. The point over here is, comes along Rashi and says, why a man and a woman, if they're together, they both have to go to the mikveh afterwards because it's a divine decree. Any questions? It's a divine decree. You want to think you know better than the Torah? Say that doesn't make sense. Let's rip out the book of Leviticus. 98% of it doesn't make any sense. It's a divine decree. By the Be'er Hashem El Moshe Lamor. God spoke to Moshe saying, or God spoke to Moshe and Aaron. It's a divine decree. What's the problem? What's the issue? Oh, I don't really believe in God. Oh, that's a problem. We can work on that. Right? But if it's a divine decree, you want to say you know better than God. Go back to Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning of creating, God created the heaven and the earth. Right? He created the heaven and the earth. Were you there when God created the heaven and the earth? No. Do you have any idea what that means to create the heaven and the earth? No. Do you understand how nature works? No. So you don't understand anything. If you don't understand anything, what are you complaining about? It's a divine decree. Right? The whole Torah is a divine decree. If the whole Torah is a divine decree, that doesn't mean we can't question. That doesn't mean we can't try and figure out what's going on, even if it's a divine decree. Right? But we have to understand why we're keeping the Torah anyway. So someone will say, because I don't want to fry in hell forever. That's not the answer. We're keeping it because that's what God wants from us. That's our obligation, Jews and non-Jews. Whatever non-Jews have to keep, that's our obligation. That's what we're doing here. Right? We're here to strive in this world. We're here to work hard. Don't you think? If it's a divine decree, God knows what he's doing. He wrote a book. He manufactured it himself. It's the best-selling book in the history of man. If it's the best-selling book in the history of man, whether people follow it, don't follow it, doesn't matter. It's the most exciting. It's the most, it's the most sold book in the world ever. Nothing to talk about. So don't you think God understands what he's doing? No, we're not saying a person can't question, try and understand. But everything's a divine decree. So over here, Rashi could say this all over the place. Right? He could say it many times over. When we got to the laws, of Azav we spoke about, the laws of Saras, also divine decree. But we understand because the laws of Lashon Hara, being a miser, other things that a person could have got Saras for. Many, many things a person could have got Saras for. But essentially, isn't it a divine decree? It's all divine decree. But Rashi is trying to give the simple explanation. And the book of Genesis, the very beginning, in a number of places, he says, I don't understand. Simple explanation doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Since it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, I'm going to explain through a medrash. And there in creation doesn't say it's a divine decree. Not that I remember. It doesn't say it's a divine decree. It tries to figure out what it means. But there are things that make no sense rationally. Totally don't make any sense. Right? And Rashi will say it's a divine decree. Doesn't say it all the time. Right? But it's a divine decree. It's all a divine decree. It comes on Moshe Feinstein. Right? We'll come back to this. If we understand everything, the divine decree, what are we fetching about? What are we complaining about? It's too hard. The laws are too hard. The rabbis make it too hard to convert. Blah, 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 blah. It's hard to move to a Jewish community. This is hard. That's hard. Million things are hard. Yes, so what? So get broad shoulders. Get a life. Get a life. It's hard. You're right. So don't convert. Don't convert. We're not looking for converts. Not interested in converts. Not supposed to be easy. 100% not supposed to be easy. Right? People cop it out. Oh, it should make it easier. Okay, what should we cut out? But the rabbis have the ability. Right? We're going to see one day, in the next millennium, in the book of Deuteronomy, we're going to see. You have to listen to Kohanim in every generation. The Kohanim are the leaders. They're the Jewish leaders. They're the rabbis. You got to listen to them, God said. God says. So now you want to think you know better than God. You want to think you know better than the rabbis. That's what some people will say. They're just rabbis. I'm going to speak to God. That's what I'm going to do. God's going to come to me. Really? Okay. Very Christian thing to say. God's going to give me the answer. There are no prophets today. None. The only prophets we have today, right, are either through little children or imbeciles or people that are mentally challenged. No prophecy today. Someone thinks they know better than God. They know how the world works. They know how he runs it. They understand the matrix. I don't think so. Right? I definitely don't think so. It's all a divine decree. So people have an issue. Why should I listen to the rabbis? Okay. So good. You have to go learn the verses over there in Deuteronomy. And then you have to understand how oral law works. And then you get questions after that. Okay, we can discuss it. But you have to understand how oral law works. Because 98% of the Torah doesn't make sense. The Torah tells me certain things, many things, no details. None. Go back to my sukkah. How do I know what a sukkah is? It says I have to take a lulav, right? My palm fronds, a nice smelling fruit. No one's ever going to think it's a lemon on steroids, right? My esrog, and willows and myrtle leaves. And they say, bring it in front of God, the Torah says. You want to tell me what that means? Now, do I attach these things to the lulav? I don't attach these things. What does it mean to bring in front of God? No definition. Don't steal. No definitions. What does it mean? Do I steal the minimal amount? Am I liable? Do I have to return it? I don't have to return it. Right? There are no details. Murder, even better. Right? No details. A person commits euthanasia. Oh, that's not murder. That's mercy. Really? We're not giving any details over here. You're not giving any details, don't you think? Wouldn't you think the Torah needs interpretation? Needs interpretation. The Torah screams out for interpretation. Because nothing makes any sense. That's the whole point. Nothing over here makes sense. We have to make sense out of it. We have to understand what it is. And how do we understand what it is? Because the rabbis tell us what it is. But over here, okay, so that was my tirade for the day. Probably have another one later. Right? So what does Rashi here say? First thing, a woman who's with a man, she's going to have carnal relations. They're going to immerse in the water. Why? Why in the world she got to have to immerse in water? Both of them. Cannonball. Why? Rubber ducky. Why? Doesn't make any sense. That's what Rashi says. Because it's a decree of the king. And there are decrees that we don't understand. And we can't understand. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try. But we have to realize it's a divine decree. And if we do understand it, very good. We understand it less, doesn't matter. If it's something, that we're able to keep, that we have to do, we have to do. That's it. So says Rashi, first thing, it's a decree of the king. That a woman becomes impure through intercourse. Now, what's the problem? What's the obvious issue with this? What if she doesn't see blood? She doesn't see blood over here. It's not that time of the month. Should be okay. Why should she become impure? Right? We're going to have to see. Right? It doesn't make sense why she should become impure. Unless she saw blood, let's say. But let's see what Rashi says. Why is a woman become impure? The reason for her purity is not because of someone who comes in contact with semen. Maybe that's the problem. Why? Because we saw it before. Right? If a man has seminal emission, right, he's got to immerse himself in water. His entire flesh. We spoke about why it says his entire flesh. Okay. So if that's the case, maybe that's the reason. She's going to come in contact. Right? Seemingly she'll come in contact. So she'll become impure. But that's not the reason. Why not? Why not? Because the contact with semen that comes through relations, what happens is in contact the unseen parts of the organs. In other words, this is biology 101. We're going to keep it clean here. The semen goes in, doesn't touch her. It goes inside. Right? So therefore, such contact does not cause impurity. Right? It shouldn't cause impurity. She doesn't touch it, let's say. Right? It all goes inside. Nothing comes out. So she doesn't touch it. So if she doesn't touch it, why is she impure? $1 million question. Why in the world is she impure over here? Right? She's impure because of divine decree. That's why she's impure. God said she's impure. That's it. Right? It's not now, what would I have thought? So I would have thought what we said before. Right? That come in contact with semen makes you impure. Right? Makes you impure over here. But that's not the case. Why isn't it the case? Because she didn't come in contact with it. Went straight in. 100%. Went all straight in. Went all straight in. No issue. So therefore, she's not impure because of that. It must be something else. What's that something else? So we hold that to divine decree. All right? That's what Rashi says. It's a absolute divine decree. Now, interesting enough, comes along the Sforno. Now, the Sforno over here says that it's interesting the way the verse is set up. Right? Why? Because what does the Torah tell me? The Torah tells me Ve'isha asher yishka vish. A woman whom a man will have carnal relations. Comes along this foreigner, what could it have said? What could it have said over here? It could have said a man who has carnal relations with a woman. Doesn't say that. Right? We're going to be pickiyun in the language. It says a woman has carnal relations with a man. Well, doesn't a man have carnal relations with a woman? Why does the verse tell me that? Asks the Sforno. Why? Because there's testimony being given that a woman does not become impure, because of the status of a zav, of having a discharge. That's not the case. Unless that discharge is red, right? Or pink, right? If it's got a reddish color, she'll become impure. Why? Because we're assuming it's blood, right? The blood has to come from the source. We're going to speak about that, right? So therefore, that's when she's going to become impure, right? Just like a guy should also become impure if he has, a discharge makes him impure, right? But over here, so he has a seminal emission, and the question is, does she become impure? We already know if we would have said it the other way, maybe she does become impure. He for sure becomes impure, right? According to this, right? So I would have thought she's going to become impure because, again, she's going to come in contact, and in the end she doesn't, right? A little bit similar to Rashi here. But he's just asking the question, why don't we look at it the other way, right? Because, if a woman has an emission, now the question is, if she's a zav, if she's really a ziva, right? A ziva, then I understand she become impure. If she had a discharge is red, she become impure. Right? 100% she become impure, forbidden to her husband. Now, the other way around, why should she become impure? She didn't do anything here. Right? She's not a zav, she's not a ziva over here. She doesn't have discharge. Per se, she certainly doesn't have forbidden discharge. Right? And everything goes in, so what's the issue? Oh, that's what you're telling me. That's exactly what the Sforno says. That's why it says it in this language. Because otherwise, I would say she should have been impure anyway. Right? Maybe she has the status of a zav or a ziva over here. Right? That's why the language is the way it is. Otherwise, we could have flipped the script in my language. Right? Could have flipped the script. Could have flipped the script. Say that 5 times fast. Yeah. In other words, it could have said the opposite way. And it didn't for a reason. Explains the Sforno over here. Yeah, so that's that. I'm going to point out just by contrast, that, Torah could be looking out for health by not eating shellfish, not eating pork, other things. Okay, could be scientists discovered different reasons, right? But that doesn't mean that's the reason, right? And we already said in Leviticus that in Leviticus chapter 11, the Kli Yakar already said that doesn't apply. That wouldn't apply. Why? It's not about health. What's the reason it's not about health? Because you see, non-Jews eat all kinds of disgusting things. Nothing happens to them. Well, forget about, the bats in Wuhan in China. But okay, they can eat snakes. They can do all kinds of things. Different things. Doesn't have effect on them. Totally has no effect on them. So if it doesn't have an effect on them, then that knocks out the health issue. Now, I'm not saying, according to science today, they could claim this. That's fine. That could be, a partial reason. Not going to be the reason. 100% is not going to be the reason. Right? There are a lot of potentially different reasons. By a Jew, we say we are what we eat. Has a negative effect. Science hasn't proven that. Doesn't matter. We don't care if science has proven it or not. Right? Doesn't really matter. The point is, we're not going to do it because it's forbidden. But it's not about health. The Kli Yakar says clear, it's not about health. Because you see, non-Jews eat this stuff all kinds of stuff doesn't affect them. They don't get sick from it. They don't get cancer from it. They eat it. Nothing bad happens in general. Now you want to say, okay, now it's been proven it can cause this, it can cause that. Fine. Right? But that's not the only reason. That could be a reason. I'm not going to say not. Very well could be a reason. It's not the reason. Right? There are many reasons, that the rabbis give for certain things. Sometimes they give one reason. Sometimes they give 5 reasons. Sometimes they give 3 reasons. It doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, the amount of reasons that they give, even if they only gave 1 reason, it could be there were 10 other reasons. And if they gave 3 reasons, it could be 50 reasons. They just didn't reveal everything. So based on that, science can say, eating these things will be hazardous to your health. Okay? Is that the only reason that we have the laws of kashrus? That's only eating shellfish and pork. Maybe some other things. What about mixing milk and meat? What about taking proper meat? Forget about pork, regular meat, and I mix it with cheese and I cook it together. What does that have to do with health? I don't know if I don't think science has said anything about that. That should be a reason, not to mix stuff like that, and cook them together. These other things could be health related. Could be. Could very well be. And so I would say so. What does that have to do with anything? Could be a reason. Very well could be a reason. Could be 10 other reasons also. Right? In other words, let's say, for instance, the reason for a mitzvah disappears. Right? There's a custom that if a person ate bread, they should wash their hands a second time before they say grace after meals. If they ate enough bread to warrant to say grace after meals. Now, if that's the case, they have to wash their hands a second time. Why? Right? The one reason is because, salt might put your fingers, maybe a person doesn't have the greatest manners, right? Ate his food with his fingers, and then they put the salt, they put their fingers in their eyes, they could go blind. It's a dangerous situation. Dangerous situation. So therefore, a person should wash their hands. A Jew should wash their hands, right, before they say grace after me. Now, there's only one problem with it. What's the obvious problem? We don't, today that's, we don't have an issue with that. If people eat with silverware, cutlery, whatever you want to call it, that's not going to happen. So if that's not going to happen and the reason doesn't apply, the question is, do I still have to do that? Even if the reason doesn't apply. So there's a difference of opinion among rabbinical authorities. Some rabbinical authorities say, if the reason doesn't apply, you don't have to do it. The reason doesn't apply. Other rabbinical authorities, and this is the majority, they are going to hold, even if the reason doesn't apply, you still have to do it. You want to know why you still have to do it? Because it's not the reason. Because the rabbis didn't give all the reasons. They may only give 2. They may only have given 1. But that doesn't mean it's the reason. There can be a myriad number of reasons. So therefore, something like that, you'll say it doesn't apply. Right? It doesn't apply today because the reason it no longer exists. We're not worried about it. So what's the problems? I don't have to do it. Come along the majority of rabbis and say no. Because that's not the reason. It's not the only reason. Could have been 100 different reasons. Could have been 100 different reasons. But we weren't privy to all the reasons. The rabbis didn't give us all the reasons. I'll give one example. Eating milk that was not milk, or drinking milk, not milk by a Jew, or a kosher cheese. Kosher cheese, the rabbis for a whole year, the Talmud says, they didn't give their reason. Why you're not allowed to eat it. For a whole year, 12 months. They didn't give a reason. Why? Because they wanted to be accepted before people started hucking them about what the reason is. So there are certain things, I mean, that's only one thing I know, right? But, that's one thing they didn't give a reason. They made a decree, they said can't do it. But they didn't give the reason for a year later. Why? Because the Talmud says they want to be accepted. They want the Jewish people to accept it. They might say, the English would say, well, it's a little bit dodgy. Why would they do that? It's a good question. Legitimate question. Right? But again, my point is that not everything out there, meaning within Jewish law, has specific reasons that have only one reason. There are many things that we're not privy to all the reasons. But it doesn't matter. Because, there could be a myriad of reasons why. And if there are a myriad of reasons, I still have to keep it. It doesn't matter. But what's the question? Question is, what if all the reasons disappear? If all the reasons disappear, then seemingly I don't have to keep it, I would think. Because now it doesn't apply. Like someone told me about kashrus, it's all about trichinosis. We eat things up today. There's no problem with trichinosis. What does that have to do with kashrus? And someone told me this, and I was in the States. We were eating a kosher restaurant eating bagels. So I said, you're eating a bagel over here. There's no meat. There's no meat. So what's the problem with trichinosis? Right? It's dough. Right? Water, flour, made into a bagel, baked, boiled, however it's made. So what's the problem with trichinosis? So I asked, I said, so what's the problem? They said, whatever, pass the salt. That was the end of the discussion. Right? So even let's say that would be the reason. That would be a reason. And the reason doesn't apply. Let's say the reason doesn't apply today. So that person would say, so chuck it. Why do I have to do it? So they're in good company. Some rabbis would say that. But the vast majority of rabbis say just because the reason doesn't apply, or the reason the rabbis gave doesn't apply, doesn't mean we don't do it. Right? That's a major concept. And again, if we'd understand these basic things, in general, we're not going to complain, why this, why that. We understand. Right? It's more than a leap of faith. Right? I'm not going to, we're not going to let anyone say, that's just a leap of faith you believe. Yeah, it's belief with knowledge. It's understanding the whole picture. If you don't understand the whole picture, you can say whatever you want. Right? Then we're not arguing on the same level. Right? Then you can say whatever you want. Right? Bottom line is that the reason disappears, we don't, we still keep it. We still keep whatever that mitzvah is, and however it applies. Somebody asks, if a non-Jew makes bread, all kosher ingredients, is a Jew allowed to eat it? No. That was easy. Let's say better, right? If a non-Jew cooks on the stove, all kosher ingredients, right, in his own pan, kosher pan, let's say better, kosher pan, never used. Non-Jew lights the flame and he cooks the whole thing up. So, not only can a Jew not eat it, even if it's all kosher, even if the Jew's watching, and the Jew doesn't have anything to do with the cooking, but not only that frying pan, right? That frying pan has to be kosher. That's why I say don't bother buying, so many dishes or pans or whatever. You're going to have to kosher them anyway. The rabbinic decree. It's called bishul akum, right? The cooking of a non-Jew. If the non-Jew cooks it from beginning to end, if it's in the pot of a Jew, and the Jew has nothing to do with the cooking, makes the food forbidden, makes the pot has to be kosher. Now we take it one step further. Even if a secular Jew, a Jew that desecrates Shabbos, if they cook something from beginning to end, right? They don't reheat something They cook something from beginning to end where the Jew doesn't do anything in the cooking process. Same status as a non-Jew. Food he can't eat. The pan, pot, whatever was cooked in, cannot be used. It has to be rekashed. Right? The food you have to throw out. Jew can't eat it. Right? Jew can't eat it. So therefore, someone here asked, that mean all the food with a kosher stamp packets made by Jews? No, it could be made by non-Jews. They can be made by non-Jews, but they're not doing everything in the process. Usually a Jew is going to start the fire. Right? In other words, it's like a baker. He's going to light the fire to make sure, that the fire's on and that the fire is big enough to cook, not just a pilot light. The fire has to be lit to the extent where it's going to be piping hot to cook. So even in, kosher restaurants, even, let's say you go to a bakery or something like that, you'll see non-Jews cooking. Yeah, but there's a Jew overseeing. Yeah, I mean, there should be. That's what you have a mashgiach for, right? Not only to oversee what they're doing, but to make sure they didn't do the cooking process from beginning to end. That the assumption is, and that's what you're relying on kashrus organizations for, that Jews are lighting the fire and they're watching what's going on. And they see what's going on, but they have to light the fire. If a non-Jew lit the fire and the Jew didn't have any portion in cooking, not just throwing a match in, but he actually stirred it up, he did something in the cooking process, then if he doesn't do that, then the whole thing's forbidden. So we are relying 100% on kashrus organizations. That's what they're doing. That they are lighting, that a Jew is lighting the fire first. And it's a fire that's enough to cook, really to cook, to get very hot. And the non-Jew can do everything else. Or if the non-Jew lit the fire, let's say, but the Jew has a portion in the cooking. He pushes the non-Jew aside. He starts mixing things up, this, that. That's fine. As long as he's doing something in the cooking process. If something's already cooked, it's already kosher. And let's say a non-Jew puts it in the microwave, kosher microwave. Is that a problem? Not a problem. If you put it in an oven, is it a problem? Not a problem. Why? Because it's already cooked. Since it's already cooked, right? What's the issue? It's reheating. That's it. He's reheating something that's already cooked. Is that cooking it from scratch? No. Does the Jew have to have anything to do with it? No. He can put it in the microwave, put it in the oven, not a problem. Certainly not a problem. Again, any food that has rabbinic supervision on it, that has kashrus symbol on it, whether it's London based in, whether it's Dine West Time or whoever, based in Manchester, swirling chocolates, let's say. Again, even if non-Jews are making it, a Jew had to lit the fire. Right? He had to have something to do with the process over here. That's what kashrus organizations do. Right? So you're going to say, so what about Mars and all that? It should be fine if that's the case. If it's got proper rabbinic supervision. Right? Like any rabbinic supervision. That's what we're relying on. There is an issue. Let's say there will be some things that will not be Chal Yisrael. If there's dairy chocolate, there's milk in it, and it wasn't milk, the milk, was the cow was not milked by a Jew. Right? So the Union of Orthodox Rabbis, the OU, on a number of products will say OUD. OU dairy, but it's not Chal Yisrael. Chal Yisrael means it was milked by a Jew. Now, there are leniencies. Someone could rely on, to eat what we call chalav stam, regular milk that wasn't milked by a Jew. So if that's the case, person relies on that. Haagen-Dazs ice cream in America, right? It's OUD, right? There are products by the OU that say chalav Yisrael, and there are a lot of products that aren't, right? They're not so stringent for that. In some cases they are, in some cases they're not. Right? Question if someone wants to eat them or not. But again, even in that case, all they're telling you is the cow was not milked by a Jew. They're not, they're not saying bishul akum. They're not saying it was cooked, the whole thing was cooked by a Jew. That nobody's going to eat. I mean, maybe a reform rabbi would eat, or a conservative Jew may eat, but no Orthodox person is going to eat it. That's forbidden. The rabbinic prohibition. We're not allowed to eat it. Right? But all the kashrus organizations all over the world, that's what they do. They make sure a Jew lights the fire. And the fire is hot enough to cook. Even if the non-Jew cooks everything else, doesn't matter. But that's what you're paying for. That's why you're paying more. Because they're watching what's going on. Even if they have 1,000 products, they go in and out every so often. Some places will have a mashgiach on the presence at all times. What they call a mashgiach tamidi. Tamidi means always. Right? In other words, there's always a mashgiach there to watch, to make sure things don't get messed up. Even if it's just a dairy restaurant, even if it's just a meat restaurant, you gotta make sure workers don't bring in sandwiches, they don't use their own knives, you have to be careful. But that's one of the things you're relying on, that a rabbinic, organization does. Sorry, let's say better, a kashrus organization, right? That's what they do. Now, let's say a person used beans, right? Let's say you had beans that were in tomato sauce and you want to put them in your cholent because they're soft, right? So it's a lot easier for them to cook. Now, even if it says it's kosher, it doesn't mean they check them for bugs. There might be bugs in the beans, right? You're going to say, come on, how could they not check that? They're not going to open up every single bean over here. They're not going to do that, right? So you got to take a sampling. Right? You take out a few, you cut them open in quarters, see if there's anything there. That's it. If you don't see anything there, it's fine. Right? Chickpeas, no different. You take a whole thing of chickpeas. You want to make a chickpea salad for Shabbos. During the week, doesn't really matter. So you take a sample of chickpeas, you cut them open. You take 10 chickpeas, you cut them open in quarters. And you take a look to see if there's anything inside them. Any worms, bugs. And if you don't see anything, not a problem. You don't have to check the rest. Right? If you find a couple bugs, then you got a problem. Then we got to check all of it. Because then we can assume it's probably infested. But again, that kashrus does not mean, at the highest level of supervision, does not mean they check for bugs. Now, there are certain things, let's say lettuce, have the best rabbinic supervision, grown in hot houses, this and that. Still, it should be checked. Definitely should be checked. Here in Israel, you want to get the highest kashrus supervision for fruits and vegetables. Why? You have to take tithes, meiser, truma. You want to make sure it's done right. Some people are strict even by the best of kashrus organizations. They take it themselves. They don't want to have any questions. But that's what you're relying on, in a bakery, in a restaurant, any cooked food, anything that's processed. That's the leniency. I mean, not a leniency. I mean, well, I guess it is to a certain extent. You're relying on a leniency over here. Actually, it's a bad name. Shouldn't call it. It's really not a leniency. You're relying on the fact that a Jew is lighting the fire, right? That's what it has to be. That's the halacha. It's not a leniency. It's halacha, right? But even if that wasn't the case, let's say God forbid the non-Jew lit it. Either you can turn it off, relight it, or you make sure a Jew has a portion in the cooking, and that gets you out of the problem. But that's what you're relying on with the kashrus organization. It doesn't matter what they make. At the same time, if it's fruits and vegetables or something like that, and you get them processed, and it's got proper rabbinic supervision, it doesn't mean it's free from bugs. So you still have to check them. You still have to see. A lot of things that shouldn't have bugs in it. Shouldn't be an issue. Right? But still, you should check. Just give it a glance over. Just make sure. There's nothing there. But that is exactly what you are relying on. For kashrus. So we mentioned before, that that a non-Jew cooks anything, all the kosher ingredients for them, I mean, they can eat it. A Jew can't eat it. A Jew has to light the fire, make sure it's hot enough to cook, or have a portion of the cooking. And if a non-Jew cooks for a Jew, and the Jew didn't do that, so the food isn't kosher, pots and pans aren't kosher, you have to kosher it. Right? That's why I say a person who's a JIT, in Jew in training has to, I wouldn't get all these dishes and all these pots and pans, you're going to have to kosher them anyway. Right? After conversion. You're going to have to go through that anyway. Right? So it's certainly better, to buy some. I wouldn't buy a ton of things. Because in the end, this is the problem. This is definitely the problem. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, let's go further. This should be a doozy here. Verse 19. Says the Torah, Visha kitiyeh zavadam, yezoiva bebisora, shiva shamim, tiyeh benidasa, kanogeya ba yitmok ada arif. It comes on the Torah. Torah tells me when a woman has a discharge, and her discharge from her flesh, meaning from where she should be bleeding from, right? We'll keep this clean. In his blood, she shall be in a state of separation from her husband for a 7-day period. Right? So let's say better. She's in separation. She's by herself, pretty much, for 7 days. Anyone who touches her shall remain impure until the evening. Somebody touches her, anybody, including her husband, anybody who touches her becomes impure until nightfall. Now, someone's going to say, but what about today? That doesn't apply today. Right? It could be, way back when, women had their own rooms, their own homes, almost, because anything they sat on, anything they touched became impure. That's only the time of the temple. That's the only time when there's a special affinity of purity and impurity. We don't have that today. There is a separation between husband and wife, true. Right? During that time. But here we're talking about anybody. Anybody she comes in contact with. Right? They become impure. Now, Rashi here says, when a woman has a discharge, I might think that where does the discharge come from? I might think it comes from anywhere. Maybe it comes from her nose. Maybe it comes from her ear. Maybe it comes from anywhere. Any one of her limbs. She becomes impure. No. What does the Torah come to teach me otherwise? Because the Torah tells me, we're going to see in chapter 20, verse 18. It says, and she has bared the source of her blood. Right? What's it talking about? Punishment for having relations with a woman who's impure due to having a period. Now, someone will tell me, well, if she's bleeding, that's kind of gross. Right? It's totally unhealthy. We're not talking about that. We're talking about when the blood stops. So you say, what's the problem? Blood stopped. Oh, but you got to wait 7 clean days. Right? Then you got to wait another 7 clean days. Right? About 2 weeks. She's going to have to wait. But even if she's not bleeding, can't be with her. Right? It's Torah prohibition. Right? So it comes on Rashi and says, this is going to teach us otherwise, because the verse says in Leviticus chapter 20, verse 18, she has bared the source of her blood, i.e., your husband can't be with his wife during that time. Right? So that's forbidden. And what does that mean? Source of her blood. Discharge of blood does not cause impurity. Where does the discharge of blood cause impurity? Except from that which comes from the uterus. It has to come from that place. If the blood, I would think, maybe the blood came from somewhere else. Maybe it came from her nose. Came from somewhere else. She got a wound. I don't know. She cut herself. Whatever it is. Right? So the problem is, that's what I would think. Comes on the Torah, says no. It's only talking about from the uterus. Now, the Medrash says, and it's brought in the Mishnah, that it says she bared her blood. Right now, there's a superfluous word over here. Right? The superfluous word is makor. It says makor dameho, the source of her blood. Right? Over there, in Leviticus chapter 20, verse 18, it says she bared her blood. Why would it need to say the source of her blood? Right? That is superfluous. I wouldn't need to say that. So here, what are we telling you? Rashi says, or the Medrash says, that only blood comes from that place, from the uterus, makes a woman impure. Now, if a woman, let's say she hasn't seen blood, right? And she's not supposed to see blood. She has a doctor's appointment. She has a gynecological appointment. And scrapes the uterus, let's say, and she bleeds. Right? That could be a problem. Why could it be a problem? Because it comes from the source. But it's not really that blood, okay? Right? There's definite issue. If it can be determined, let's say there was a wound there. There was a wound there, let's say. And we can determine that's where it came from. That's where the blood's coming from. Then she doesn't become impure. And she's okay to her husband. Right? But obviously it has to be known. But if it comes from that place, she should become impure. Right? So that, in other words, we have a superfluous word. We don't have to say the source. We understand it's coming from the uterus. Not coming from the uterus, she's not impure. That's one thing. Now, second thing Rashi here says. Rashi here says that what? Rashi says, or discharge from her flesh, being blood. So a discharge is not called a discharge, making her impure unless it's red. Right? Now, blood, the Talmud tells me, blood connotes redness. Right? It says in Kings 2, chapter 3, verse 22, Moab saw the waters red as blood. Now, there are 5 different colors of blood, right, which can render a woman impure. And they all fall in the category of red. Black, right? It can be black, certainly pink, right? Black can be dried blood. Pink can certainly be, certainly can be blood. There are 5 colors, right? There are 5 colors that can render a woman impure. And now this is the reason, brown can also render a woman impure. In this case, she has a certain discharge, right? Let's say. And, she hasn't got a period yet. So now the question is, if it's on something that become impure, let's say it was on her underwear. Let's say it was on, something of cotton or something like that. Right? So then you need to show it to somebody who knows what it is. There are rabbinic experts, that can see what it is. They can tell if it's really blood or not. Right? So, some people think, people say, so disgusting, right? I have to show my underwear to the rabbi and this and that. There's you have to understand, let's just read the verse here. Because we're going to get to it one day. I don't know when, but one day we're going to get there. Chapter 20, verse 18. Says, the man who shall lie with a woman in her affliction, has uncovered her nakedness, has bared her source, right? It says over there, has bared her source. Why source? You could just say she's bearded. Why tell me the source? Tell you that it only has to come from the uterus. And she has bared the source of her blood. It says it twice, even. 2 of them will be cut off from the midst of their people. This is pretty bad. Right? A Jew, let's say better. Jew has relations with their spouse. We'll make it easy. And she got a period. And he was with her. What's the punishment? They will be cut off from the midst of their people. They get kares. Right? 100%. They get spiritually cut off. They lose their portion of the world of them. It's pretty bad. Right? Definitely pretty bad. So what do we see? We see it's a severe prohibition. Now you tell me in the secular world, most people do not follow family purity laws. That is very true. Right? And their kids, we're going to see, if I get there, see what my Rebbe says about that. That a person can be a ben nida or a bat nida, that her mother never went to the mikveh. So it can have negative character traits based on that. But my Rebbe's going to say, we'll cut to the chase. He's going to say if a person works on themselves and they raise themselves to high spiritual levels, then this won't apply. Then all this won't apply. Right? But essentially, the parents, they lose a portion of the world to come. 100% they lose their portion over here in the world to come. That's how severe it is. So comes along Rashi, and he says, so what color makes her impure? Red. Well, there are different shades of red. Oh, that's how I got onto this. Because if there are different shades of red, not everyone is an expert, in these laws. I mean, you have to look at a lot of these things in order to see, and someone obviously who knows what they're doing to teach you, right? So someone say, oh, that's gross. I can't believe it. This, that. If a person sleeps with their wife and there's a questionable stain and they don't get it checked and it really is forbidden, they could get spiritually cut off unless they repent. That's what could happen. That's the severity. Ignorance is in bliss over here. Right? You have to know. Is it permissible? It's not permissible. If it's not permissible, it's a Torah prohibition. You get spiritually cut off. Because you're going to say, okay, what does Rashi say? It has to be, the discharge has to be red. There are 5 different colors of discharge. So you're going to say, well, brown's not red. It could be. Pink is pretty obvious. Black is probably pretty obvious also. I mean, red goes without saying, right? But if you're not sure, why would you take the chance? You're going to say, because the person in the throw of desires. I get it. But you want to take a chance of being spiritually cut off? That's when you have to go ask a question. That's what you have to do. Right? And again, some people say, oh, that's disgusting. You're not allowed to uncover the nakedness if she's forbidden. Right? If she's, and if there's a doubt, over here, you get it checked out. You get it checked out before you do anything. Because if you don't, you could be liable to being spiritually cut off. You and your wife. Not just you. Not just the guy. Wife also. Because you weren't careful in these laws. They're pretty strict laws. There's no question, but it's not something you want to mess with. Says Rashi further. Rashi says, inner state of separation. Right? That's how he translates in her nida, the state of separation. The word is like yinidu. In the phrase, from the universe, they will banish him. Right? The word nidui, same root. Nun dalid yud or nun dalid vav. Same root of the word means to be excommunicated, to be banished. Right? We use it today as being excommunicated. Right? So why is she referred to in this way? It's not her fault. It's the way of the world. It's a normal thing. It's nature. She's referred to this way because she is banished from touching any person, not just her husband. She's not allowed to touch anybody. That's why we use this word. Rashi says, right? She's barred from touching her husband. In times of the temple, contact with us is also limited. Why? Because she could transmit her impurity to everyone else. Right? It's obvious she's forbidden to her husband. That's clear. Question is, what about everybody else? Everybody else is pretty severe because she doesn't want to go make it everyone impure. So therefore, it's like she's banished. you're going to say, but it's not her fault. No one says it's her fault. We're going to say it's Chava's fault. It's Eve's fault. She ate from the tree. She caused it to all women. It's her fault. Doesn't matter. In the time of the temple, she sat on something, she touched something, becomes impure. Right? We've seen that. That doesn't apply today. This only applies to her husband. Right? I mean, it's not like she's going to be touching other men either, but it'll apply to her husband. Won't apply to anyone else. On the time of the temple, applied to everybody else. Right? So explains Rashi over here. Comes along the Baal HaTurim. Baal HaTurim is the son of the Rosh, the Tur. And the Tur says, when it talks about this blood, it doesn't matter whether it's wet or dry. Whether it's wet or dry, she becomes impure. And when does she become pure? When she goes to the mikveh. Right? So says the Baal HaTurim. Now comes along the Rabbeinu Bachai. Now the Rabbeinu Bachai over here says she has to sit 7 days. Now, we didn't ask one fundamental question. And the fundamental question was, how much blood does she need to see? I might think maybe she needs to see a lot. Right? So he says the Rabbeinu Bachai over here, even if she only sees a drop, all she needs to do is see a drop of blood. And all she needs to do is see it once. Doesn't really matter. She has to wait 7 days. Right? Just like Rashi said, she has to wait 7 days. Now, comes along the Rabbeinu Bachai. And the Rabbeinu Bachai says, okay, we're talking about 7 days over here. We're talking about impurity, very good. But he says this verse over here is very close. The verses in general, when it comes to Nida, the woman's cycle and all that, it doesn't really tell us that much. Doesn't give us any information. Essential. Not only that, he says it doesn't mention anything about tefillah. Going to the mikveh. Doesn't mention anything. All it says is somebody that touches her at that time, they have to go to the mikveh. Right? As it says in verse 21. Right? Let's just see verse 21. That it says, anyone who touches her bedding shall immerse its garments and immerse himself in the water. And he remains impure until evening. But only mention it later. Doesn't mention it over here. Don't mention it later. And we also see that one of the commentators, Talmud says, he says, where do we learn it out from? So the reality is, he says we learn it out from someone who touches this discharge when they have relations. Whenever he goes the whole thing. How we learn out, and you have to go to the mikvah, blah, blah, blah. And he learns out through all other impurities as well. That you only become pure, essentially, you only become pure when you go to the mikvah. That's when you become impure. Now, there's another thing. There's another thing over here. Comes along Rabbeinu Bachai, and he brings down from the Talmud. He says there's certain things during that time a woman can't do for her husband. Anything that's going to draw them closer, that they may forget, or they may be lenient for no good reason, because they might be in the throw of passion because of something that a woman does that could bring them to that. So, says Rabbeinu Bachai, the Talmud tells us a certain thing the woman can't do for her husband during that time. She can't get him drinks, per se. She can't fix his beds. She can't wash his hands, face, and legs. Well, obviously, she can't touch him. Right? She can't pass things to him. Right? That's forbidden. So, that's the first thing. Rabbeinu Bachai here says that mixing his drink, getting him a drink is get the passion going, so to speak. But if a person, let's say, they on the table, they put something on the table as a remembrance that of the woman's status, something they wouldn't normally put on the table. Let's say, I don't know, they have fake flowers. And these fake flowers never go on the table. But during those 2 weeks, let's say they put them on the table. Or they put something, on the table as a remembrance. So then that would be permissible. Not to pass it, but to give it to her. To give it to him. It's a remembrance that they're not going to do anything. That's one thing. Second thing is making the bed. Right? It can also be something of intimacy, but she's allowed to make the bed when he's not around. If he's not around, it's not in front of him, it's permissible. And by washing his face and his hands and his legs, that's pretty obvious. Right? So he says, not only in hot water, not even cold water. Right? I mean, that makes sense. That would make sense over here. So therefore, a person during this time, has to do certain things. They're called harchakos, things that would be far away one from another, to make sure they don't do anything that may lead to intimacy. That's forbidden. So you're gonna, say, come on. The rabbis added a lot of things over here. I understand not touching. Right? I understand not touching. What about other things? Making the bed? Come on. You have to tell me, can't make the bed in front of me? What about handing something? She's handing you a plate. She's handing you a bowl of soup. Gee, I didn't know the last time handing someone a bowl of soup is an intimate thing. Right? But these are things to keep a person at bay, to remember. Right? To be careful over here. Right? That's why not only they don't touch, they don't pass things, etc. And then he says another thing here. Right? Verse 18, verse 6. It says that, let's just see the verse here. It says, any man shall not approach his close relatives uncovered nakedness. Right? So it says you shouldn't uncover nakedness. Anything that a person would do that would uncover this nakedness, let's say. So he says, you can say, what's the big deal? What's the big deal over here? The husband and wife. We're not going to say where, forbidden relationships and all that. What's the problem? Okay. I can understand, at certain times you're not going to do that. Fine. It makes perfect sense. But what's the problem? What's the problem over here? Says Rabbeinu Bachai, an unbelievable thing is, why aren't you allowed to reveal whenever you want this nakedness? Because a woman, that's where children are created from. That's where children come from. So therefore, you want to have pure children? Then you don't uncover it when you're not supposed to. It's supposed to be for purity. It's supposed to be used for the right thing. Right? Not for morality, not for other things. But in this case, you tell me they're already married, so what? Doesn't mean you can be together whenever you want. In this case, it's forbidden. Right? So the whole point over here is that area is creating a child, and it's the fitting place for the soul to go in, to go into the child. Now you're talking about a pure soul. You're talking about a pure soul, isn't it true? That, that should be used in the proper way. He said, and it's known, all the character traits of the soul go after from where it's created. That's why, when a person's together with their spouse, they should have purity of thoughts, not just about the act. We're not just animals, but it's about purity of thoughts. And if the possibility you could create a child, it's the thoughts that go into the child. It's not just in the throes of passion, right? I mean, that's part of it, but, it's the thought that goes in. Person may say, what does that have to do with anything? God puts the soul in, right? Time of conception. The soul goes in. So if the soul goes in, shouldn't it matter what both people are thinking? That should be purity of thoughts, right? Some level, maybe not for this generation, but in general, that should be the case. Because he says the character traits of the soul, that's where it goes. It goes into creation. Your thoughts matter even at that time. And then the Torah tells me, or the Talmud tells me, that anyone who has relations with a nida, with someone who hasn't gone to mikveh, even their spouse, that's what we're talking about here. Right? What's the punishment? Chayv kares. The punishment is kares. They get spiritually cut off. 100% they get spiritually cut off. No portion in the world to come. Even if he would sleep in his clothes and she would sleep in her clothes in one bed, still forbidden. Right? Still forbidden. Right? Chapter 18, verse 19. Right? Let's see that here. It says, should not approach a woman in her time of menstrual impurity to cover her nakedness. So I would say, okay, what's that? I don't uncover her nakedness. Person doesn't uncover the nakedness. Right? So if that's the case, what's the problem? You say, well, no problem. Why? They both have clothes on. Still forbidden. Totally forbidden. Why? Because the Kodesh Baruch Hu, God warned the Jewish people about purity, about holiness, to not go after the actions of the non-Jews. Right? Because it's brought down, interesting enough, that the prophet Zephaniah says, right, that we learn out that all non-Jews, their parents didn't go through Nida. They didn't separate. Right? You're gonna say, well, they're not obligated. They're not Jewish. You're right. They're not obligated. They certainly don't have an obligation. No question about it. But what about those children? What about the children? Secular parents as well, but secular Jews as well. But they have an obligation to keep the laws of family purity. And what if non-Jews don't? Which they don't have to. And most likely, all the kids that they have to be the majority. Very hard to imagine it's not. Forget about them going to the mikveh. They're all b'nai nida. That's where they come from. Could be a few days after they get their period, whatever it is. No woman can get pregnant. Whatever it is. And we learned it out from the prophet Zephaniah. Because he says, Yoshvei Chevel Ayam Goy Karos. Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 5. Yeah, what does he say over there? Let's see if I find it quickly. Yeah, Tefania chapter 2, verse 5. Woe to the inhabitants of the seacoast nations of the Heretites. The word of Hashem is against you, Canaan land of Philistines. I will destroy you without an inhabitant. Yeah, they get destroyed. Right? They totally get destroyed, wiped out. Right? Seemingly, what's the reason? This reason. But you're going to say, come on, they don't have an obligation over here. But who are the children? How are the children conceived? He's saying that's how they're conceived. So you say, okay, you also see, want to finish this up. He says over here further, if you look at the parsha, you find the Torah does not obligate a nida to give a sacrifice like a zav, like a ziva. What's the reason? Because a nida, woman gets a period that's natural, right? 100% natural, and she's never ever going to get healed from it. The only way she gets healed from it is when she's older, she doesn't get it. That's it. Right? Otherwise, it's a sickness that never goes away. Right? Something that's natural never goes away. All women get it. Because that's something normal. It's something natural. And therefore, she's impure 7 days. You know, whether she saw blood on the first day or whether she saw blood on all days, she's forbidden 7 days. And normally, they don't have more than 7 days. Somewhere between 5 and 7. Right? Usually today it's probably about 7. I didn't take a survey. But it's usually 7 days. And then she has to wait another 7 days, clean days, where she doesn't see blood. And then she goes to the mikveh. So that's a natural thing. Oh, but a ziva, we spoke about, that's not a natural thing. Right? That's either she sees blood when she's not supposed to. Maybe in between periods she sees blood. Right? That's not a natural thing. Totally not a natural thing. Therefore, the Torah tells me if a person, in verse 25, it says a person has a discharge, right, of blood, could be many days, and not at the time she's supposed to see, right? There's an overlap. Right? In other words, she get a period. Let's say she saw blood for 7 days, and then 2 days later she sees more blood, right? 2 days, 3 days, however many days. It's not her period, right? Definitely not her period. It's the status of a zav over here, ziva. It's not the right time, right? Totally not the right time. And therefore, she has to bring a sacrifice. Why does she have to bring a sacrifice? Because this is not a natural thing. This is something that's not natural, and she gets healed from it. And once she gets healed from it, then she has to bring a sacrifice. Now, interesting enough, says Rabbeinu Bachai further. Says Rabbeinu Bachai further. He says you have to know that, these laws and what happens to a woman, you don't find by any other women of any other species. But by animals, nothing. You don't find it by anybody else. Any other species. Only by man. Only by a woman. And that's the punishment. Any women out there want to blame somebody, the punishment's on Eve. She gets punished. Because the Torah tells me in Genesis chapter 3, verse 16, because she ate from the tree, you're going to be in pain. I'm going to increase your pain. What's your pain going to be? This is going to be your pain. And having children. No animals have this. You know why no animals have this, says Rabbeinu Bachai? Because they don't have any minds. They don't have any seichel. They don't have any understanding. They don't have any, nothing they do is the result of reward and punishment. Nothing. Right? They're programmed DNA. It's not going to be reward and punishment. Now you tell me if if a person did something wrong with the animal has to be put to death. Why? You're going to say no reward and punishment by an animal. No, but the animal caused damage and the person died for causing damage. The animal killed someone, so the person dies. The one who owns it, right? If he's negligent, why is the animal left alive? The animal's left alive. You're going to say, oh, look, that's Reuven's cow. Oh, poor Reuven got killed because his cows killed somebody or his ox killed somebody, whatever. But that's not because of reward and punishment for the ox. It's because of the person, right? So you don't see reward and punishment by an animal. You don't see it. Oh, what about the flood? Someone will ask me about the flood. Because animals intermingle their species. You're going to say, but they don't have free will. You're right. But the problem was man's actions were so strong, they even had power over animals, where they wanted to shack up with other animals, not of their own species. That's a different issue. So you see by women, says Rabbeinu Bachai further, you see by women, even a drop of blood should be impure. But why? Why did it start off in the first place? Because of what Eve did. 100% is what Eve did. And that's going to be forever, doesn't change. Right? 100% doesn't change. So Rabbeinu Bachai said before in chapter 12, verse 2, I'll just see the end of that. He says a similar thing. And you see that you have to stay away from them when they became impure. That, even way back when, even the nations stayed away from their women when they got their period, as well. And they were also considered impure. Right? And who do we see that by? We see that by none other than Rachel herself. Rachel Amenu. That, what did she say to Lavan? Right? They weren't Jewish at this point. Right? What did she say? In Genesis chapter 31, verse 35. Right? She's sitting on the chest that has the idols. And she says, don't be angry, my master, because I'm not able to get up because derech noshim li. This is the way of women, i.e. I got my period. Right? I can't get up. Now, when she tells Lavan that, says Rabbeinu Bachai, an unbelievable thing. Lavan doesn't say anything. Lavan says nothing. He doesn't answer. Why doesn't he answer? He says, because you understand, she's supposed to be sitting by herself in her tent. She got a special tent, right? She's got to need a tent. She's by herself over here. And she wasn't even supposed to be spoken to. Right? Why didn't he answer? Why didn't he say anything? He didn't say anything because even they understood if a woman's impure, you don't speak to them. Because they have spiritual cooties over here. Kaufman's language. Spiritual cooties. You don't speak to them. You know why you don't speak to them? Because impurity could go pretty far. Impurity could go pretty far. So they don't take any chances. Not only that, right? He says that no one's going to come close to this person at all because their odor. Their odor doesn't mean they smell per se, but even their odor could cause damage. Right? We're not going to get girls, not like they're leaking all over the place. We're not saying that. But even their breath could have a negative effect on somebody. So you see over here, why didn't Rachel get up? So you understand why she didn't get up. She didn't want to find the idol. But she could have got up. She could have got up for her father, drawn close to him, kissed his hand. She didn't even do that. Right? She didn't do that. Because even her looking at him, causes negative things. Potentially negative things. So he says, interesting enough, it's brought down. The Ramban brings this down later. And he says, the following. He says the Chochmei HaTeva, the wise people who understand nature. What do they say? That if a woman who gets a period at the very beginning, and she would look at a sword, a sharp sword, or in a mirror, what would she see? She would see drops of blood. Because the nature of evil causes damage. And he says that's a sign that even looking can cause damage. So a person will say, okay, that might have been the time of the Ramban. Right? That might have been, way back when. Today we don't see that. But a person's going to say, what do you mean it causes evil? What type of evil over here? It's a natural thing. It's a totally natural thing. Everyone's going to say that. No one's going to disagree. But way back when, it had tremendously negative effects. Right? The impurity, could go here, go there. Could cause damage. Tremendous damage. He said you should also know, as we mentioned, it's not all bad. Might we get to a good part here, right? Even though this is a natural thing, and every woman's going to get it by nature, right? In general, it's a benefit for the child, for the potential child. Why? Because what happens when a woman gets a period? Her whole system gets flushed out. And because the whole system gets flushed out, so to speak, once the child, is conceived, so then that area is tremendously pure. Right? In other words, all the bad stuff's gone. So now the child can form, in a proper way, in the best way. And therefore can be prepared to acquire the soul, right? That the soul can go in. Because really it flushes out the system over here. But again, he says you don't see this by anyone else. Right? Not only that, one other thing, and I'll take some questions. He says that by any other creature, any other animal, when they want to feed their child, they get the child to suck the milk. Where does it suck from? It sucks from the same place where basically she gave birth, that area. Right? Not by a person. Right? You would think maybe, that's where the child should suck from, but obviously biology doesn't say that. Not true. Why? Right? Because it's brought down. Talmud says that's where knowledge is. That area, right? The place where a person has seich, is understanding. not just from the brain. Right? So it's a whole different thing. Whole different thing over here. So says the Rebbeinu Bachai, there's a benefit. There's a total benefit over here. And that is that when a person, gets that whole area flushed out, then they get pregnant, it's a whole different thing. Right? It's a whole different thing. So explains the Rebbeinu Bachai. I'll take any questions. Somebody asks, can an animal that is out, that's put to death, be eaten? No. A person can only eat, let's say, better. A Jew can only eat an animal that's ritually slaughtered. If it's put to death, you can't eat it. That's called the vela. Right? It's called carrying. Or, if it's a treifa, if it's got like a sign, one of the 18 signs that it will not live for a year, you still can't eat it, even if it's ritually slaughtered properly. So if it's put to death, I can't eat it. Forbidden. Someone asked, who were the angels that sat and ate with Abraham? I don't know. There were three. There were three that, one to heal him, one to tell Sarah she's going to have a child, and one to overthrow Sodom. What were their names? I don't know. They were angels. What do we see? That an angel can only do certain things. He can only do one thing. God gives them a task. That's what they do. They don't multitask. Angels do not multitask. So what do we see? We see angels only have, when God tells them to do something, they do one thing, and then they're given another task after that. So there were three, right? That's what they were there for. Someone asked, why does God test man? So we can reach potential. Everything we do is a test. The whole purpose of life is to see if we're going to overcome the evil inclination. If we're going to do the right thing. If God forbid, we're going to blaspheme against God. Right? Book of Job. God tests Job. And he lets Mr. S do whatever he wants to Job except kill him. Can't kill him. So he took everything away. Because the Satan said, you know what? He's going to curse you. God says, no, he's not going to curse me. It's okay, try. Do whatever you want to him, just don't kill him. Everything we do is a test. If a person's looking for money in their pocket and they don't come up with the right change, that's also a test. Right? It's also a test. Considered part of suffering in a certain way. So the whole purpose is draw close to God. But if everything would be so easy, who's going to sign up? Person's got money, got a good job, wife, kids, everything's good. Right? Within reason. Everything's good. So if everything's good, why would they pray to God? Why would they bless it? Why would they praise it? It's a test over here. Everything we go through is a test. Right? We're here to reach potential. To reach a minimal level that we can have a portion of the world to come. So we have to do our best to reach whatever that potential is. But it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Right? If God wanted to make it easy, everybody would join. Look at Abraham, went through 10 tests, very hard tests. And Abraham built a legacy. He built his legacy based on all the tests. The last test, God didn't have to give him. God gave it to him anyway because that's what his legacy was. It wouldn't have been as great. So we're building our own legacy through tests. Nobody wants them, but that's who makes us who we are. Because if everything was so easy, we didn't have any tests, then nobody would grow spiritually. Right? That's what I was saying, short. Someone asks, Samuel David said to have a household idol. I don't know what that is. They have to give me chapter and verse. Having idols at home, yeah, it's forbidden. Right? 100%, it's forbidden. No question. What was the idol? What did he use for? I don't know. Right? I have to see it in context. But I would assume it's not an idol like we think it is. Because obviously idolatry is forbidden. right? Adultery would be forbidden. You're right. It would be strange. Right? 100% would be strange. Right? It's the question. You have to see the context. You have to see what it is. You have to show me a source. I'll look it up. Yeah. Any other questions? Or any general questions? All right, there are all the questions. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop here. I do this every Sunday, 9 o'clock Eastern time. Normally 4 o'clock Israel time. It was an hour earlier outside of the States because we changed the clocks. Any other class I'm going to give this week anyone outside of outside of the States, so it'll be an hour earlier. So I'm doing there's going to be no Tanakh talk later. But at 8:30 Israel time, or 2:30, I guess 2:30 or 1:30 Eastern time, whatever it is. It's gonna be an hour earlier for me anyway. So 2:30 Eastern time, 8:30 Israel time. I'm doing a class on Noahide laws. Going to go through the history, I guess history of the Noahide laws. If anyone interested in that, go to nohidenations.com. You can sign up for that. Otherwise, I'm going to sign out. Anyone has any questions, feel free. Find me on Facebook at Michael Chaim Kaufman or Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism. Send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com.